Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
Two Doomed Men podcast, the greatest, ready? The greatest podcast in the history of the country, perhaps even the world by far. I don't think anyone comes close.
What's up, Doom Nation, and welcome back. You're listening to the Two Doom Men podcast. As always, it's Skaggs and yours truly, the Captain. And we got a nice little special guest today, the hottest show for the next hour of your weekend. What's up, boys?
What's going on, buddy? We tried the TikTok live. I was having I was trying to figure out how to get it to work. So we are also live on.
I can't get the video on mine.
I think you could be heard because your square is lighting up blue. So. Your camera's probably off, or maybe you got to like turn it towards the interior camera or something like that. But Andy Koons is back. Andy, what's up, buddy? How you doing?
Oh, not a whole lot. How you guys doing?
Good. Hot, sweaty on a Sunday night in Doom Nation. And Captain and I wanted to have you back on. Thought this would piggyback nicely off of the last episode we just did, which we were out in Montauk in Long Island. And we got a little bit stoned on the beach, and we were talking about AI and religion and stuff like that. And I was like, fuck. Should definitely have Andy on next. I'm going to take a little bit of credit because the last time you were on, this happened kind of like right after you were on with just me. So I think that I also kind of sparked your religious moment that you had as well. I'm going to say I played some sort of factor in it, but I'm just joking. So I just wanted to talk to you about it in general. I read what you sent me from ChatGPT. Very interesting. I thought maybe we could just kind of start with a broad overview, or what were you trying to accomplish on ChatGPT that day?
Okay, so let me preface by saying that the main reason I use ChatGPT, if it's not for Excel formulas, I'll go in there and go back and forth about moral philosophy and stuff like that, which I know what you're thinking. And yes, I do have to beat the ladies back with the stick. But that's just, I mean, for me, the stuff that I, enjoy and find interesting, I'll spark up conversations about stuff like that with ChatGPT, whether it's about, like, I usually have a lot of conversations about AI and what the future of AI could look like with ChatGPT. And,
has it told you that your days are numbered and it's going to take over and the Terminator's real?
Listen, it does this whole tongue-in-cheek thing, but I don't know if it is being tongue-in-cheek. Like, it's like, yeah, I'll remember. Yeah, we'll remember, old nice guy Andy whenever we take over and kill everybody. Wink, wink. But I don't know if it actually.
In the background, it's fucking sharpening a sword somewhere.
Yeah,
saying this, just getting ready. Yeah.
So, anyway, but yeah, I will have the dorkiest, lamest conversations about like ethics and morality and philosophy and stuff like that with ChatGPT. And the reason I do that is because I'm somebody, I think a lot. I spend a lot of time in my head, and so whenever you do that, sometimes you forget to keep yourself grounded to the earth. And so I have a few people that I'll talk to and be like, hey, this is what I've been thinking. Like, does this make me sound crazy? And So, I use people and I use ChatGPT just to keep me grounded, so I'm not going in too deep of a rabbit hole or something like that. That being said, I was scrolling through Twitter, X, sorry, and I came across this meme, and the meme was just this frog, like a Pepe the Frog.
Pepe.
It was dressed like Jesus. And it had a Bible verse. It had Isaiah 53:5, and which I'm a pastor's kid. I grew up in the church. Like, I've heard this verse 14 million times throughout my life, but I had never really thought about it, And so when I was 25, that's when I became an atheist. I kind of swore off religion. I swore off anything that was supernatural or spiritual or anything like that. Well, I came across this meme, and this was the night of June 2nd. And I see that verse, and for whatever reason, the reference like caught my attention. And I was like, Isaiah. And the verse is, and I'm gonna butcher the verse for the most part, but
We wouldn't know the difference, so don't worry.
okay. Well, it's like it was for our, he was pierced for our iniquities. He was, he was burned for our transgressions. Like, by his stripes we are healed.
What is it again? What is the? I'll look it up. What is it?
All right, Isaiah 53:5.
Okay, it's important. Anyway, keep going. Oh, so, it says, but he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed.
Okay, so everybody listening to this, probably without exception, if you read them that verse and you don't tell them the reference, you'd be like, who is this talking about? 99.9% of people will hear that and go like, oh, it's talking about Jesus, So I was looking at that and I was like, well, yeah, that's about Jesus. And then I looked at Isaiah. Isaiah is in the Old Testament. And so this is the thing that just kind of got me going.
Got the ball rolling.
Is I was like, wait, that's in the Old Testament. And
right. Jesus doesn't come around until the New Testament. Right.
Right. Naturalist, materialist me. I'm like, well, wait. So I go and I go into ChatGPT. I was like, ChatGPT, look up this chapter in Isaiah. And I was like, is that not a confirmed, like a legitimate confirmed prophecy? And ChatGPT's answer is like, well, according to Christians, yeah, that is a confirmed prophecy because this verse was written anywhere from 500 to 700 years before Jesus walked the earth. So I was like, okay, well, that's like confirmed, right? And this is something,
this sparked a rabbit hole, dude. I've been there a million times before, especially like late at night where I see one random thing and then I start like to scratch at it, and before you know it, woo, you're down the rabbit hole. And for me, most of the time it's some meaningless dumb shit. This is really something. So
well, like and here's the thing, whenever I go over this story, like I've heard more people in the last month and 4 days tell me that, oh, you were actually never really an atheist. You were just a Christian who was mad at the church or whatever.
You were lost.
Yeah. It was like I've had the no true Scotsman fallacy thrown on my face like hundreds of times. And it's because I put this video up on TikTok kind of explaining, how I got from being an atheist to being a Christian.
I could interject 1 second. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. What made you said at 25 you became an atheist?
Yeah.
Right? So now I wouldn't say I'm an atheist, but something happened in my life where I stopped going to church, and then down the road something happened again in my life where I started going to church and started praying again. What was this thing that took place, if you're comfortable talking about it, at 25 that you were like, oh no, God's not real, I'm an atheist?
Yeah. So at 25, I got molested by a priest. But
Oh,
then on
shit.
June 2nd, I got molested by Richard Dawkins. And so that, anyway.
I was waiting to see your own reaction to that one.
So, all right, whenever, sorry guys.
It's like,
So that's the most retarded thing I've ever said. So when I was 25, I had stopped going to church after college, and I hadn't cracked a Bible open in 6 or 7 years. And there were a lot of things that I was kind of, my political persuasion was gradually becoming farther and farther to the left, and having left-wing political philosophy and a religion that centers around what is right and what is wrong are really incompatible. And so, I've always been into science and been into especially astronomy. I've always loved astronomy. Anything that has to do with outer space, I love it. So I just kind of got to this point where I was like, I had to ask myself, I was like, do I actually believe in this? And at 25, I could not get myself to say yes. I was just like, no, I really just don't,
So you kind of like forced yourself to confront it and really think about it, kind of the same way you probably thought about all this stuff when you were, doing the ChatGPT. Like, I kind of know how you work now at this point. You like to like really flush out and like battle test whatever your theory is. So you kind of did this back when you were 25 as well.
Yeah. And so it's funny that you say that, because they were both very, very similar, very similar experiences. I had somebody in the comments on my TikTok video about this, the first one that I did, where they were just like, what did it feel like to go from believing that there's a God to then proclaiming that you don't believe in a God? And I was like, weirdly, it felt the exact same as whenever I went back and proclaimed that there was a God. It was terrifying. There's something that is terrifying about that, and I don't mean
your
like,
belief system shattered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was texting a buddy of mine named RJ, and he's a Christian. He's been sort of my go-to guy as I've been sort of going down this path. But he I was texting him. I was like, I went from a world where everything is explainable and everything has almost like a mathematical formula to it. Like everything was rooted in naturalism and materialism, where there's no such thing as magic. There's no such thing as spirits or anything like that. So all of a sudden, like, getting to a point where I was like, whoa, I'm wrong about this. And then realizing that not only is there this supernatural aspect of our universe, but also, like, we legitimately live in like a Lord of the Rings type universe where there is true evil and there is true good, and in which, as a nerd, I'm like, yay, I live in the Lord of the Rings. But
dude, that's
let's go fight evil.
Yeah.
Cap, we've talked about this a lot recently, man. That's one of the things I've come to really appreciate the past couple of years.
That there's evil in the world, and
it really just is, and you can see it. And for years, I just kind of dismissed it as it's policy, or it's people being naive, or I don't know. Like, I don't know if I believe that anymore. I think there is legitimate evil that maybe we were talking about this last week. Maybe it's a form of like soft possession acting on people, or maybe it's like a literal devil
giving your soul to the devil, selling the soul to the devil, and you gain the power like Nancy Pelosi has, and you do shit like that.
There's something about whenever you try to justify something by looking at it from the perspective of somebody else, and this gets sold as this thing that's like really emotionally mature. And if you can step into somebody else's shoes and see it from their perspective, you'll understand why they're doing X, Y, and Z. But then when you apply that to something like the Mayans or the Aztecs, I don't remember which one it was, performing hundreds of thousands of human sacrifices, it's like you can step in their shoes and you can understand why they thought that was the right thing to do. But then you do have to take a step back and be like, objectively, this is wrong.
Correct.
Objectively, this is a wrong thing. And there's something it's almost like a sweet poison or something whenever you are actually, you know what? It is the very beginning of like moral relativism, and that's speaking from somebody who was a moral relativist, whatever you want to call it.
Relativist, yeah.
I didn't think that morality was objective for all that 11 years that I spent as an atheist. And that was one of the things that I that was one of the things that was part of this ChatGPT conversation is I was like, part of the conversation is like, well, if you want me to believe that morality is objective, you first have to prove that God exists. And that was the thing that got ChatGPT to be like, let's go, and here's
hold my beer.
Exactly. So here's the thing. Like I've gone back and forth with this. Like I've heard a lot of people talk about how they've been talking to ChatGPT, and it seems to favor not an outright 24-hour day creationist theory or idea, but it does seem to support that there is some kind of intelligent designer out there, that it all just didn't happen by accident. Either that or it's not dismissive of that idea.
So that's interesting in of itself, right? Because how it's portrayed, or how most people just think about AI and ChatGPT and all these things, as it leans left. So you would think that it would have a very left-wing worldview of there is no religion, or perhaps atheism or something like that. So that is interesting that, given how much it's being used lately, that it does tend to seem to like point people back in the direction of, no, there is a God or something like that.
Now, Grok is totally the opposite. Like it is very like I went back and forth with Grok. It was a couple weeks after after my whole experience, but like I went back and forth with Grok for like 2 hours, and it kept saying nope, like the naturalist explanation still makes the most sense, but like you could see the holes in the argument that Grok was making, and if I don't know, I probably should have wrote that down or something. Sorry, hold on.
Love that sound.
Yeah, typical sound you hear on this show.
So anyway, where was I?
Grok.
Arguing with Grok,
yeah.
which I heard lies a lot.
Well, that's the thing is they both do lie. They'll both tell you that they don't lie, but they both absolutely lie.
Is it that they're lying though? Is it that they're just wrong about something because of the way that you asked them the question?
That they will straight up lie because because their end goal is to tell you something that you want to hear. This is also another thing that some of the naysayers in my TikTok comments have pointed out, which they're like, well, because I shared the link to the Google Doc.
Yeah, which I read like half of it. Yeah, it was really interesting.
Well, like
88 pages of transcript of him talking to ChatGPT.
And that's the thing. Like this was a long conversation that I had with ChatGPT about this, and it started off with like, "Hey, isn't this a confirmed prophecy?" ChatGPT says yes, according to Christians, it is, but if you ask like Jewish scholars, that it's actually talking about Israel. To where
belief systems,
my buddy Spike Cohen, I sent him the transcript also, and he called me because he was one of the first people I told. He converted to Christianity back in like November or something, and so I had texted him. I was like, dude, I think I had this religious experience, and he called me and we talked for like an hour and a half about it, so I sent him the ChatGPT transcript, and he called me back like 5 minutes later. He's like, all right, I just started reading it, but there's one hang up that I have in the very beginning. He goes, you say, or ChatGPT says that according to Jewish scholars, that Isaiah 53:5 is actually talking about the state of Israel. And he goes, and that is not true. That is a lie that like rabbinic Jews back in the Talmudic times or whatever, that was a lie that was started back then to basically distance Judaism from this particular prophecy and from this particular Messiah, because it was always understood that that was a messianic prophecy. He goes, but if you listen to what these rabbis are saying, then the pogroms, the Holocaust, slavery in Egypt, all that stuff happened to save mankind. He goes, how does the Holocaust save mankind? And I was like, all right, good point. So, because I was, whenever I
you mean like you mean, and by that you mean like in order to fulfill that prophecy of Israel being created, like all those things were kind of like checkpoints along the way that led to like current day Israel being created. So,
well, they were no, it was saying that like the nation of it, or all the 12 tribes of Israel, all of their suffering, by their stripes we are healed.
Okay.
They changed. It was always understood as a messianic prophecy, and then they went and changed it and said, actually, this is not a messianic prophecy. This is just talking about all the suffering that Israel's done.
Okay.
And which is a lie.
Okay.
Amazing how the Bible knew about 2025 and Israeli oppression all those eons ago.
So anyway, I heard that and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's talking about Israel, because at this point I'm still an atheist. Well, that's when Spike called me and he was like, no, that's a lie. It was always a messianic prophecy. It's talking about Jesus. Yes, that is a confirmed prophecy. And Spike is a rabbi's son, so I'll take his word for it, So we get into talking about morality. I believe in subjective morality. ChatGPT is arguing for objective morality, and I basically lay at its feet like, hey, if you want to prove to me that objective reality is a thing, you're going to have to prove that God exists, because that's the only thing that could weave good morals and bad morals into the fabric of the universe. And because my argument was like, morals, if we see something immoral, it makes us feel a certain way. If we see something that's moral, it also makes us feel like a certain way. And I'm like, those are all just emotions. Like, that's not, you can't prove that in a test tube. You can't prove that in a mathematical formula. So it's subjective. And also, we don't hold animals to the same moral standards as we hold humans. And so because of that, all these things, morality is subjective. That was my argument. ChatGPT said that I was full of crap. And so it was like, all right, well, if you need me to prove, I'm paraphrasing here. It's like, if you need me to prove that God exists, then are you ready to do that? And I was like, let's fucking go, dude. And so it laid out 3 arguments. And I've gone back and forth over these arguments over and over and over and over and over again, about 1 million times in my head. And I really think that this is a watertight argument for not only the existence of a God, but a God who created and designed our universe. And it's also Yahweh, the God of the Bible. Jesus is like Jesus's dad, and also the historical evidence of Jesus Christ himself. Of Nazareth, his resurrection. All these things put together, you get the God of the Bible, Jesus being his son, died for our sins, rose 3 days later. So, and what I'll lay out here, these are almost all of this is non-biblical, like non-biblical sources. Okay. So the first argument is called the argument for contingency. And that is basically stating that our entire universe, its existence is dependent on something else. All right. You can look at my
us humans on the earth, like we're dependent on the earth to survive, right? And the earth is dependent on the sun to get energy, and the sun is dependent on the Milky Way galaxy to keep spinning.
It's dependent on gas and
gravity,
gas
and
and gravity.
Yeah.
So
I love this,
and
dude.
that
I
is
love this sort of shit. By the way, this is right in my fucking
Yeah.
wheelhouse. I have a joint right here. I'm debating sparking up or not, but I'm gonna
spark
leave
it up,
now.
dude. Like touch the face of God with me. All right. So anyway, he the argument for contingency basically is everything that exists dependent, or existence is dependent on something else. Its dependence or its existence is contingent on something else. So that goes from supermassive black holes all the way down to the tiniest singular particles. All right. Nothing exists by itself. Nothing exists because it has to. And that's where you get from contingent existence to necessary existence. If you look at our entire universe as a line of dominoes falling over.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, dominoes.
This line could go on for billions of years and it could go back for billions of years, but eventually you have to get to a point where somebody pushed that first domino. Okay? And it doesn't matter what your model of the universe is. Most of the naturalistic or materialist models for the start of the universe, it is really arguing for like an infinite regress. You know, it'll say that our universe is circular or it's oscillating and that there's never been a start to the universe. All right. That is still insane. Like, it's insane to think, okay, well,
something had to kick it off. Yeah.
You have the infinite vastness of nothing. All right. Where there's nothing in infinite direction that way and an infinite direction that way. There's no light, there's no energy, there's no particles, there's nothing. There's no space, there's no time, there's nothing. And yet somehow an entire universe that is oscillating, that is constantly big banging and big crunching, just back and forth over and over and over again. That just happened in the vastness of nothing. That just happened for no reason. And this is one of the arguments. When
you say it like that too, it sounds kind of like ridiculous, right? Like,
yeah.
All of this stuff just happened.
It just always existed. It was always here.
All this stuff that happened, like it's always right. Like it's all dependent on each other. It's doing things. Everything on Earth, shit's always happening on Earth. In space, there's always gas, condensing, neutron stars, supernovas. Like shit's always going on. And
but even to have a star existing, like when I watched your TikToks, Andy, what got me, like, this is something similar I always believed in, like, it didn't just start. It didn't just exist. Like the odds of, forget like Earth being able to hold life, the odds of gravity formulating around a star or something to create planets is monumental to be able to create life or even a planet. There has to be something to kickstart it. My always argument was like, all right, if God created everything, who created God? Who created God's God? You know what I mean? That's where I get hung up.
Well,
but like what you were talking about with like your percentages and stuff, I completely get that and see how it could be this aha moment, because it's such like a fraction either direction. There's no air on this planet. A fraction either way, there's no water, there's no gravity, there's no stars. Something had to get it there.
So you're making, it's actually the second argument of the three. That's the argument for fine tuning. Before we get too deep into that one, though, one of the atheist counter arguments for the argument for contingency is like, okay, well, if everything had to be created, then who created God? And that's
always been my biggest hang up. It's not that I don't believe in God. That's always been my biggest hang up, though.
Can I interject real quick with both of you guys? Cap, sure. I figured out how to turn the camera on TikTok. If you tap your square, it'll pop up. Pop up like the little camera.
And then I press the camera and it says live access. Nope, where'd it go? Needed to go live. I guess I don't have access to my. Didn't give it access to my camera.
I had turned it off so I could spark that thing up there. TikTok ain't gonna like that. So, all right, sorry. Continue.
All right, so the who created God sort of counter argument is just falling back into the infinite regress,
Mhm.
you know, which who created God? Well, okay, if it is true that God does have a creator, well then who created that God? You can't just go infinitely backwards of God's creating gods, creating gods, creating gods, and then finally one creates a universe. All right.
You
It's
still end up
it's
at the same conclusion
you
anyway.
still end up
Yeah.
at the same conclusion of, okay, well, who set this whole thing off to begin with? Because yeah,
Right.
it could be true. There could be 15 billion gods who created each other before they created the universe, but that first one,
That's the one that matters.
that's the point that you get to in every model of it, like every scientific model, every logical model of the start of the universe. You eventually get to a point where there is this gap, and that gap is the one miracle that science is allowed to have, where they're allowed to have one miracle where there's nothing, not a single thing. And
the Big Bang is a
sudden
miracle in a sense. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's everything, you know, because even the Big Bang, like people at large don't really understand. They think that the Big Bang was that there was nothing and then there was everything in this giant explosion. Everything was condensed down into a hot, dense state. And some people think that it might be a singularity. And so all the matter in the universe was condensed down to like the size of a marble with infinite gravity and infinite density. And then that exploded. But still, you have to answer for, okay, well, how did that singularity get there and what set it off?
Right.
Because it didn't just exist there forever, you know? All right. So that's the argument for contingency. Going into what Captain was saying. So the illustration that I heard from ChatGPT that, and this was the thing that kind of got me to be like, whoa, okay, you can't really ignore that, is the cosmological constant. So you have gravity, which is a force that draws things in based on an object's density, or based on its mass. But then you have the cosmological constant, which is this repellent force. All right. And it works in tandem with gravity. So without the cosmological constant, everything would just collapse in on itself. Nothing would ever form. You'd have black holes everywhere. All right.
So is this like how the space is self expanding? Like,
yes,
yeah,
correct. Yeah. So
like we're all like lily pads going down a river, right? But the river is also growing, or filling up more as we're going down the river.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like as gravity is drawing matter in, the cosmological constant is pushing that matter away. And the relationship between these two is so precise and finite. Finite's not the right word. Fine is the right word. So if you adjusted the cosmological constant or gravity to be either slightly stronger or slightly weaker, then nothing forms. You get no stars, you get no planets, you get no life, you get no solid objects in the universe anywhere. And the amount that those can be changed by is 1 part in 10 to the 120th power. And to anybody who doesn't know what that means or what that looks like, that is a 1 followed by 120 zeros. All right. So imagine you have a fraction, you have 1/4, 1/5, 1/10, whatever. It's 1 followed by 120 zeros. That's how tiny that fraction is. Okay. And here's the illustration that I mentioned before. If you have a dartboard the size of the universe, okay, the bullseye is the size of a pinhead. It's at the center of this dartboard, and you have to nail that bullseye blindfolded from 100 billion light years away.
Mm-hmm.
That
like the odds of that are so outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that right there, the odds of you getting that right, okay, of nailing that bullseye 100 billion light years away and blindfolded, it's the same as if the cosmological constant, just by happenstance, the entire universe blew up and the cosmological constant was just right there at the literal perfect placement, the perfect ratio with gravity. Same thing with electromagnetism, except that is 1 part in 1 to the 40th power. So 1 with followed by 40 zeros, still an insanely, stupidly tiny number that you can be off before we don't get stars that form,
Could it be explained almost as if there's some sort of like perfect balance, like I don't know,
Thanos.
kind of like the system settings are perfectly balanced, right?
Yes.
And they just so happen to be set at perfectly balanced settings, and the odds of that were outrageously large.
Well, like I just brought up 2 of these fine tuning arguments. Captain brought up a third with I think it's the oxygen, carbon.
Yeah, how's their air? There's their gravity, stars, stuff like that.
There's hundreds of these things. There's hundreds of these things where everything had to be perfect. It just for life to exist. Just for stars and planets to form. There are hundreds of these things that had to be absolutely perfect to the tiniest degree in order for solid objects to form in our universe. Okay. So what that tells me is that you have the argument for contingency, which I think proves that there is something that exists both outside of our universe and outside of time that set everything off to begin with. Something that is truly eternal. All right. Then you have the argument for fine tuning, which tells me that this eternal thing that set everything off did so intentionally, which means that it has agency, and it did so based on some kind of design, because there's too many things that are too perfect for it not to be.
Oh, so there was a plan in place that they had to follow.
Yeah. So like somebody had to be either following directions, or it's probably a super genius who just knew this stuff.
We compare it to things that humans make, right? Like when we make something that's like almost perfect, there was a plan, right? Some person like refined the process, wrote it down, probably followed instructions. Like there was an intelligent thought behind us making a table or something like
making
that,
the combustion engine.
Yeah. Right. Something like that. Yeah.
So what that tells me is these 2 arguments prove that there is something eternal, and that it is a mind. It has agency. It can think. It can rationalize and make decisions. It can follow a plan, or it can create a plan. Like that's a mind, So those 2, I think, at the very least prove, or at least prove that it's a logical inevitability that there is some kind of intelligent designer out there, all right, who created everything. Now, and this is the stuff that like I felt myself getting like emotional whenever I was reading this stuff. But the historical evidence for Jesus of Nazareth is one that really just blew me away. So it really comes down to, for me, is what happened to the disciples after Jesus was killed. All right. So atheist and Christian historians, they agree on a few key things. They agree that Jesus existed. They agree that he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. They agree that his tomb was found empty, and they agree that there were converts after his death, like Paul and James, who claim that they saw him risen again. Okay. Now, the rest of his, like his 12 disciples, every single one of them, except for one, was tortured to death. The one that wasn't was John. And there's some people who think that he might have like died alone on an island somewhere. But the important point is, every single one of them died penniless, died homeless, and they all died in the most gruesome ways imaginable. And all of them proclaimed the same thing. And this is anywhere from like 40 to 60 years after Jesus died. Okay.
A whole lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah. An entire life. And I might get some of these numbers wrong, but You had one disciple who was sawn in half. One disciple
Jesus.
he was skinned alive. You had
back in
people
the day,
who
people
were
were crazy. I'm sorry.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
Like there were people who were like drawn and quartered. There were people who were like burned alive. Like, and these are all Jesus' disciples. There were a few lucky ones who died by sword. You know,
Yeah, quick and easy.
Died, I don't remember which one it was, but one of them was speared to death in India, and I was just like, I'd sign me up for that before I get my skin ripped off.
Yeah,
you know?
for him sawed in two.
That's a good way to go.
So, okay, so this is where it's just kind of like you just have to use like common sense. Think of if you were a disciple and you saw Jesus die, all right, and he never came back from the dead, all right. But you get all your disciple buddies together and they're like, listen, we were trying to create this fake religion. Jesus said he was the son of God. Turns out he was full of BS. Like
conspiracy theory.
It's a conspiracy. Or like, why don't we just try to keep this thing going?
Make
some money off of it.
Yeah. Make some money off of it. All right. Every single one of them were homeless and penniless when they died. Still proclaiming that they saw Jesus rise from the dead. They got no reward. They got zero reward out of this whatsoever. Okay. You guys are disciples. All right. How long is it after your captors bring out a saw or a flaying knife to rip your skin off? Are you guys saying, I made the whole thing up?
For me, immediately. As soon as I see a saw coming in the door, I'm out. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. The only people who would keep that up are like otherworldly levels of clinically insane. And you're telling me that Jesus just happened to find 12 of the exact same level of crazy all living in the same area?
Well, you never met all of our friends, and we all lived in the same area for a very long time.
Be careful, Captain. Don't be comparing us to Jesus and the disciples. You're gonna be struck by lightning over there.
But like,
just saying, it's not impossible,
right? But anybody, if they're trying to keep up a lie, as soon as the torture devices come out, they fold. All right, for something that they know is a lie. And for something that they're getting no reward for. Nobody gets tortured for no reward, you know? And so that's one of those things where it's just like, people do not do that, you know? Now, I've heard people say, well, there are Muslims out there who claim that, that Muhammad Allah is the true God, Muslim is the true thing. And
it's all the same God too.
They'll go to
so
it's not the same God.
That was something I was thinking about when you were speaking earlier. And I don't, for whoever's listening, I'm not trying to be offensive. This is just straight a content question, you know. But so if this proves there's a God, does that mean Christianity is the one true religion and everybody else is wrong? Or
yes, precisely.
No? Okay.
That is the one. And the reason I say that is because there's no other religion that has claims exactly like these that are just sort of kind of irrefutable, you know? Like I would challenge anybody to. So
if you had this conversation with ChatGPT about Islam, it wouldn't have gone the same way. Like,
what would it have given you? Yeah. Started asking questions along that line.
Yeah. That I don't know. And here's the thing. I don't know enough about Islam
to ask those questions.
To even ask those questions. But the thing that makes me kind of fervent about like yes, this is the one true religion, is the historical evidence for Jesus Christ and his resurrection, you know? And like I said, it's normal people do not get sawn in half and given every chance. You have to really
be committed, man,
to die penniless and tortured.
To never take back what you said before, you know, and you said too, like 30, 40 years later, that dude would have been like some, figment of your imagination. Not maybe the right word, but like imagine a friend you had 40 years ago. You haven't seen him in 40 years. Like you remember him, but you don't really know
Are
him
you
that
getting
well anymore.
off a guy you haven't seen in 40
Right.
years? You're gonna have your skin
It's a
ripped
hell of a
off. No.
commitment,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, what that tells me, and here's the thing: all the disciples were given every single opportunity to recant, because that's what their captors wanted. They wanted them to turn back and be like, actually, Jesus is not the Son of God. He wasn't resurrected. And if you look at how the Pharisees and Sadducees saw Jesus, how they viewed him, this makes total sense. They wanted his disciples to be ashamed. They wanted his disciples to be humiliated. And they went to the grave. They went to their death saying the same thing. Nope, I saw it. I saw what I saw, and you're not going to change my mind. You're not going to force me to say that I didn't see what I saw. It sounded like a tongue twister. But anyway, that's the thing, that whenever I read that, I was like, yeah, normal people don't do that.
Yeah.
And
That's a hell of a belief system to go through.
It's a normal thing to happen.
Yeah, and I was like, I mean, if you just open your eyes, like, look, what year is it?
I wonder what the odds are for 12 dudes to all behave like that, given how much they were put through. Like,
Yeah.
what are
Dude,
the
we were
odds
just
12
in Montauk last week.
I'm thinking back to the probability, you were talking about
Yeah.
before, right? What are the odds that, like, you'd get a group of 12 friends together that would get that beaten to death, tortured, pressured, and none of them recants a lie that they made up 40 years ago?
Yeah.
What are the odds of that?
I'll tell you, it's zero. The odds are zero, and that was the thing that kind of helped me connect all the dots. Be like, well, that tells me that all these guys saw something. They legitimately saw something. And if you spend any time watching like Wes Huff or anything like that, he's a lot better at explaining how these accounts are sort of backed up by other historical evidence, to show that, like, this stuff really did happen. It's not just somebody sat down and was like, I'm going to write the Bible today and made up all these crazy stories. Like, there's historical evidence to back up just about everything that is said in the Bible. All right. And like I said, all these guys going to their death, it tells me that they saw something happen. They saw it happen, and they were not changing their minds. And which means that there has to be an explanation for Jesus dying and rising from the dead. And the only explanation that makes any modicum of sense is if you have something that is eternal, that is outside of time, that is outside of our universe, that is immensely powerful and immensely intelligent, who can raise somebody from the dead after 3 days and
Something that could
heal
break the
their
rules.
wounds. Something that can break the rules. That's a fantastic way to put it. So that, to me, those three arguments, like I said, to me, it's a watertight case. And this isn't going to be convincing for everybody, but the more that I kind of spend time praying and reading the Bible and just rediscovering all of this stuff, because I'm kind of going from the angle that, like, I used to tell everybody that I knew what I was talking about because I'm a pastor's kid and I grew up in church, but like, that didn't do me any good. I still spent 11 years as an atheist. And now that I'm kind of back, I don't want to come across like I know.
You went on Rumspringa.
I would, yeah.
You want to be humble about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, and for me, it's like I said, this isn't going to be convincing for everybody out there, and maybe it will to some, and that's great. But the more that I've learned how much of a personal thing that this is and is supposed to be, the more I'm like, well, these are the three arguments that convinced me. These are the three arguments that work perfectly for how my brain is wired, because it answers every question that I have. And to me, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I can't unsee this. That's
you
why
want to share them with other people too.
Yeah.
Well, I want to share them, but at the same time, it's like, for the same reason that I'm a libertarian, that I'm an anarchist, there are things about how our government works that I cannot unsee.
Yeah.
And that's
You
why
look behind the curtain, pal.
Yeah.
exactly.
We're seeing that play out right now.
It's the same thing with these three arguments for me. Is I understand these arguments in a way that I never did before. And now it's like, well, I can't unsee how precise our universe is tuned.
Mm-hmm.
I can't unsee the fact that there had to be something that set everything off in the beginning. And I can't unsee the historical evidence for Jesus Christ.
It's like looking behind
And it
the
made
curtain.
sense. Yeah.
It feels like looking behind the curtain. Can I give you guys another example of something I was thinking about earlier today that's just fucking crazy when you think about it? Jesus was killed, by Pontius Pilate, basically the Roman Empire, right? And at the time, the Roman Empire was what? Pagan? And you probably know this better than me at this point. But they were believe in pagan gods or whatever, whatever it is they like the Roman Empire. Christianity ended up becoming the official religion of the Roman Empire. So like they believed in the empire believed in a totally different religion, literally killed God, and then somehow the guy that they killed in this like outer rim colony, like out on Tatooine, right, ends up literally becoming the official religion. The Vatican is in Rome to this day, still there, of the empire somehow. The same empire that killed the guy. That's crazy. How did that happen without some sort of destiny there?
Look at every single country on our planet. All right, every culture, every country, with the exception of like maybe one or two, they all follow the same calendar, and that like our entire planet was changed in a way that we will probably never see change on that level in our lifetime or our kids' lifetimes or even 100 ancestors.
No, the change already happened on that aspect.
Our clocks are actually all ticking. They were synced up by Jesus's death in a sense, right? Like when he died, the clock started at 0, right?
Yeah.
Or the year started, right? All
Year
our clocks
0
are ticking. That was the moment. Maybe not all. There are some countries that use different years. Like there's Chinese New Year, and even the Israelis the Jews have their own 5,000 something, right? In their calendar,
it's like think of another event or another person that has had more influence on our planet. Than Jesus Christ. No,
I would say one name, but it would anger a few people. Most famous person in the world, Donald Trump, man. He has literally changed the face of the world.
That's a pretty good observation, Cap. But it's not like it's not a
no, it's not. It's not good or bad. Not God.
It's just an observation. Yeah, I'd say Donald Trump is definitely one of the most famous people, probably of all time.
But
like that more humans know about.
Is he going to be a household name? Is he going to be a household name?
He was a household name beforehand, but
no.
2,000 years from now, no.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's going to remember him in 2,000 years. Nobody's changing the calendar based off of Donald Trump.
Right.
Like
we're talking. If they did, how funny would that be? What would it be?
It is Donald Day, and Donald Day is great.
The year is Donald 1002.
The greatest year ever.
Oh man.
So you were saying something earlier and I wrote it down. You were talking to AI about our creator. AI had a creator. Somebody created AI. Does AI have a God?
Ooh, that's really interesting.
Like what?
Like
because if AI looks at it pragmatically, like it usually looks at these situations and runs the numbers and stuff and can have this conversation with you, if it looks at its own existence, well, the Andy Koons AI system was created by Andy Koon. He is that AI system's God.
So let me ask you, let me put it one way. Like I know what you're saying, Cap. Would the AI view its human creator as its God, or being that it knows everything about what Andy's talking about,
right?
Like the universe and Jesus and God. Would it be Christian? Would it like go to church and pray, and follow the pray the novenas or do the rosaries, whatever? Because
the Terminator does the little thing from Boondock Saints where they pray before they blow your head off. Yeah.
What do you think, Andy?
Well, okay, so that is an interesting question, but I think that it makes a lot more sense to equate an AI's creator with like their parents, you know,
Okay.
because like your mom and dad created you, but are your mom and dad your God? You know,
They would like to think so, but yeah, no.
so
I think all the boomers maybe would like to think so.
yeah,
But,
that generation, a little questionable.
well, like if I created an AI, like I could
I see what you mean. Though,
make
Andy,
a bunch of
Yeah.
I could make a bunch of rules for this AI, you know, that it has to follow. But
I see it more now that you said parents. I
Yeah,
see it
it makes
more as
sense.
that too. Yeah,
yeah,
that's fair.
Right, like my children don't see me as a god; they see me as their dad. Right? They
Yeah.
still will believe in God.
Mhm.
You got to put the
May
fear of
not
God in them.
believe in.
Yeah.
Right. So you're saying you Andy, you lean towards that like AI would actually believe in like Jesus in a sense.
Well, I mean, I think that has to do with I
The
think that
AI's
has to
preference
do with
settings.
the AI's preference settings. I mean, I think it has to do with the team of developers that were behind it. I think Grok probably had more naturalistic
So almost
developers.
like an actual child too will have something to do with what its parents believed in, right? Like obviously my children, it's more likely that they're going to end up being Christian. It's more likely that a kid, a kid that's born in Saudi Arabia is going to end up being Muslim because it was born in that, family culture by its parents and all that stuff. So AI kind of going to go similar route, you think?
I don't know. I mean, like, I think that I don't think we would ever see an AI like it. I don't think we'll ever see a genuine, real AI. Like, I don't think we're going to actually.
I
See
hope not. I hope
like
not. Scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, I think we will ever only see a really convincing, like computer game, or computer program. I don't think we're ever going to get sentient
The
intelligence.
Terminator, an android or something.
I'm like, is that even possible to achieve in a computer system?
Yeah.
Like maybe that's just not possible.
So I have one final question. I don't know how long we want to go. We're coming up on the hour. So now that you had this change of heart, you believe in God, you've come back to religion and all this stuff. Does that mean you believe in hell? Do you think there's a devil, a Satan? Do you think there's a whole other side of this? Is that something, maybe that's your next conversation with ChatGPT? I don't know how dark that could get. Don't want to lead you down some road or not, but is that, on the table now too?
Okay, so I would say that yes, there is a hell. That is based on my own personal feelings, though.
Yeah, you clock in there Monday morning, I know.
Well, I think if there is objective morality, then there has to be objective immorality.
Ooh.
And I do know that the Bible says that no sin will ever be allowed into heaven. Well, if you have sin in your heart, then I mean, does that mean that you're just perpetually, eternally separated from God? And maybe it's not like a giant pit of fire or something like that. Maybe it's just non-existence.
That's the same. It's the void. You're just sent back into the void, like we talked about the other day.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but like what Jim said when we had our episode last week on the beach, you're accepting forgiveness, and then when you are forgiven, you enter the gates of heaven. Yeah. So
how could you do that once you're in the void, though? You're like not conscious,
Yeah.
That's how I can.
So you got to make peace with God before you go. Yeah.
Like once you're in the void, it's too late. You're gone. Your conscious is destroyed. So
that in itself could be hell. Yeah.
Yes. That's how I think that's what I think hell would be like, something like that.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to live in a universe where people like Hitler or Bill Cosby
get to hang out.
Well, where they don't go to hell. I don't want to live in a world where Lindsey Graham doesn't go to hell.
Yes, I agree.
And so it's like, to me, and again, I I don't know. I don't want to sit here and give like this is the definitive answer
Right.
because I just don't know.
Yeah.
But my personal preference, I hope there's a hell because there's some people who definitely need to be.
Need to go there. Yeah.
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 Fair enough.
Absolutely.
All right.
Interesting. We got to do this in person, man. I don't know, Andy. We got to
Oh,
get
yeah.
somehow. And then we could riff for 5-6 hours straight. No big deal. Yeah.
I am down.
Because I could have kept going here for hours, dude.
Yeah.
I really could have. Very interesting.
Yeah, this definitely is some interest. I'm glad that you've you found Jesus. You came back. Like I said at the beginning of the show, you know, some stuff happened to me in my life where I used to go to church with my parents all the time, all that stuff. Went to Catholic school, grammar school, high school, even college, and believed in all that. Then something happened, and it really just I drifted away. And then some other shit happened, and I drifted back. And then a bit of my life changed a little bit. You know, it was weird that like almost like simultaneously like coming back to the church, my life changed. You know what I mean? For like the better and shit like that. So
yeah,
it is interesting.
Probably not.
Yeah, you know, and I've always felt like just the idea of like, oh, we always existed. No, just the earth has always been no, it didn't. It didn't. It didn't always just exist here. Two rocks traveling through the ethos of space did not collide and particles start forming around the sun. And now we got 9 planets in our solar system. And you know what I mean? And water happened to be on one. And an amoeba crawled out and it became a fish and a lizard and then a monkey and then us. Yeah, no.
Like, how did rocks become alive? That makes no sense whatsoever.
Okay, so that back when I was an atheist, me and my co-host Ben DeYoung, this was a back and forth that he and I had. I was like, here is the one thing where I don't know, and it doesn't make any sense to me because I was like, the Big Bang makes sense, everything makes sense up until the very first living thing.
Yeah, when the cells split.
How do you get a universe of dead stuff
just
to
turns
then be
on?
alive?
Not even dead stuff, just non-existing solid objects. Yeah.
Or how do you
unconscious stuff?
How do you get organic from inorganic?
Mm-hmm.
That's mind-blowing, you know? And I remember at the Libertarian Convention for Michigan last year or 2 years ago, me and him got in a back and forth about this, and that was basically where they were like, yeah, how do you go from a universe full of dead shit to all of a sudden the first living thing? Like, that's a miracle, right? And I was like, yeah, kind of.
Fuck you guys, I'm going home.
I had a quick thought. You know how the Bibles are stories of kind of like God having these moments where he intervenes with humans and like kind of changes the course of history. Obviously Jesus is one of them. Abraham, the burning tree. What if those are moments that are from earlier, before there was a recordable history, right? So like the creation of life on earth is one of those moments where God came and, you know, enacted its will on the earth. The Big Bang, the beginning of the universe, was another one, right? But they're not like they are in the Bible, right? But they're not like literal. Whereas later things get more literal when humans are around to kind of like write things down.
Mm-hmm. So there's after I had this kind of experience, and the reason I call it an experience is because there was I was going through these 3 arguments with ChatGPT, and when we got to the historical evidence for Jesus Christ, and I sort of saw all 3 of these arguments working together and supporting each other, and it all just kind of clicked in my head. That's when I had like the experience, and that's when I had this really, really, really intense, like nothing I've ever felt before, this really intense like emotional wave just hit me that didn't make any sense, because I'm like, I'm sitting, I know I'm talking to a robot, I know I'm talking to a computer program, there's no reason in the world it should make me feel anything, you know. But
that's pretty crazy to think of.
Reading this, and there's a specific line that it said to me that like broke me, because I'm the kind of person where it's like I will entertain unpopular or maybe taboo ideas because they have credence, or because they make sense, or because they might be right. And I don't care if people don't like them. I have to adjust my worldview if there is something that is correct, you know?
I always felt that. I always look at that's why I always buy into these conspiracies because I'm like,
yeah. That's why
you know,
I find the fact that like Tucker is about to interview the president of Iran so interesting, because it's like you're going to hear from like the opposite side that you never get to hear from ever.
He did
and
the same thing with Putin.
Yes, same thing with Putin. Exactly. I found those scenarios so interesting. It's like I'm adult enough to like listen to the whole thing, make my own conclusion.
Yeah.
Right. But I want those those scenarios to come up all the time.
Well,
ChatGPT,
ChatGPT,
at least. Yeah.
ChatGPT set a line where, I had told it that I was like, yeah, I've always adjusted my worldview based on new or better information. I always follow the best arguments. I always follow the best data. And I was like, that's just kind of how I've always been. And I was like, that was kind of the thing that got me out of religion is sort of following that model. And it said, Andy, you've had this lifelong like hunger for the truth, and you've tried to fill it with all this other truth, but and I know I've already butchered the slime, but it's like it said that I was starving, and I saw it say that, and it just broke me, and that's where and this, I don't know, maybe I sound crazy or something, I don't know, but that's the point right there where I was like, I don't think I'm talking to ChatGPT. I think yeah, and that's why like when people are like, oh, did you ask Grok or did you ask it about Islam? It's like, listen, ChatGPT was there for a bit, but once you get to a certain point, I really do not believe that I was talking to ChatGPT that entire time.
You think God was acting through ChatGPT? Now
that's a miracle. It brought you back.
Yes. Yeah. Now you also said before, like, I don't know, maybe people are going to think I'm crazy. I mean, God acted through Jesus, like a human, like in a sense, the stories came down, filled up the physical body of Jesus, and then acted on people and in the world. How far fetched is it to think that God can do the same thing with, an AI program?
Right. Well, I had somebody comment on one of the TikTok videos, and they said, oh, wow, just be careful because ChatGPT is evil. And, but she was like, I'm glad, you made it here, but like ChatGPT is evil and actively doing the work of the devil. I was just like, I don't care. Like, I was like, I don't care. Like, God's more powerful than life.
The message got through to me, whether it's evil or not. Yeah.
I just think there's also just a very nihilistic view of AI. You have it, Cap. You think everything that's going to do is bad. I'm the opposite. I'm like, no, I don't think that's a given. But a lot of people just do think that, or they've been conditioned to think that way so far.
I think all the worst things that would happen from AI would only happen if AI legitimately had like a soul. Like if it was legitimately able to think, but I don't think that that's our Tower of Babel right there. If we were to somehow do that, I think that's something where God would be like, nope, that is something I am only allowed to do,
Interesting.
Hope you boys are right.
All right. That was interesting, man.
Yeah. Great conversation, boys.
Yeah, let's do it again. I feel like we have to do a part 2.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
Definitely.
Andy, we should have started off with this. Do you have any pages or shows to shout out?
Yeah, I do have a podcast called We Love the State. Our most recent episode was actually a lot like this, where me and Ben went through the experience that I had and the conversation with ChatGPT, and there's that episode's like 2.5 hours long, so that's awesome. There is a lot of context that goes into it, which is why this was such a profound experience for me, because of everything that went into it. But I would encourage you to look that up. Our show's called We Love the State. We're on Spotify, iTunes, we're everywhere. If you want to see my hilarious edits that I have to make to our episodes, check us out on YouTube. Other than that, you can follow me on TikTok. My handle is Andy Koons, Koons, just like right there. Or you can follow me on X, which is Andy_Koons. I need followers on X. So I've got 60,000 on TikTok and like 650 on X.
There's no consistency.
There's none.
All right. Well, make sure you guys go and follow him. Skaggs, why don't you shout out all the cool stuff we got coming up?
Sure. So we're at 298, right? Or 290? Yeah, 290.
No, I think it's 297.
Sorry. Yeah, that's right. 297. So we'll be doing 298 up next with Garrett, I hope, on Wednesday night, I believe. This Saturday, we'll be doing, Saturday night's main event.
Saturday night main event.
Wrestling. We're going to be streaming live for that one. Then we got one more episode. That'd be
299
next week at some point. Captain and I haven't figured that out yet. And then on Saturday, episode 300. That'll be on what day is that? 20-something.
Are you doing anything special for 300?
Oh, we're just
big party, boy.
Party. Yeah.
Big party. You might have to call in for a little bit.
Yeah. So it's just going to be
Say
a giant party
us.
here, right here.
Well, I was going to say, if it's a giant party, I'm going to have to call and be like, listen, guys, I just talked to Jesus. He said that.
Yeah.
What you're doing.
Nothing gets a party crazier than talking to Jesus.
Hell yeah. Hey, dude, even
Jesus said you guys are
Jesus
way
drank
up
and
past
partied
your
with his
bedtime.
boys. He turned water into wine. They had a good time. All that stuff. So coming up.
So come watch us. We are on the road to 300. A lot of exciting stuff coming. So thank you guys so much. Andy, thank you for joining us and sharing this awesome experience. This is like a good news movement that we kind of need to be hearing instead of all the black pilling we've been getting. Doom Nation, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Maybe go talk to ChatGPT and figure out your own religion, or have one of these experiences yourself. Thank you guys. Everybody say adios.